Well, hello all, and welcome back to What is Truth. I'm your host, Jack Morgan, and today on the podcast, I am joined by Father Nathan Symeon to talk about his vocation to the married priesthood in the Byzantine rite of the Catholic Church. For those of you out there who are coming from a Western or Latin background, which is the majority of my viewers, which my viewers also know that I'm Byzantine Rite Catholic. So we've discussed the topic of married priesthood a few times on my show, but not like in depth. It's just in passing, like made mention of it. So I wanted to do this podcast for several reasons. One, whenever I tell a lot of my friends in Latin Rite Catholicism in the Western Church that there is such thing as married priesthood, they kind of see the two things as so contradictory that it's almost like this one thing's like worse than the other. That celibate priesthood is like the nature of the priesthood, and that also so therefore like married priesthood's bad or something. There's just some general revulsion to it. Um, and so I wanted to, kind of be able to explain that, Father Nathan's not an alien; he's a human, as well
Sure.
as to do this because I know that this is something that Abbot Nicholas, who is a friend of both Father Nathan and I, although I guess his name's not, I don't know if it's still Abbot. Will we still call him Abbot Nicholas? He just recently retired. Will we still call him
Oh,
Abbot?
I don't think that's how it works, but I could be wrong about that.
Okay,
Father Nicholas will always work anyway. He
Father
used to
Nicholas.
always get on me because I would call him Abbot, and one day he said, why do you always call me Abbot? What if you like you're an ice cream man? I always called you an ice cream man. Hey, ice cream man. So I don't think he'd be upset if we stopped calling
Okay.
him Abbot.
So Father Nicholas, one of the things that he said about reunion between Catholics and Orthodox, um, which the spiritual tradition of both Father Nathan and I would be Orthodox. However, we are in full Catholic communion. Talking about the reunion between the Catholic Church and the Orthodox Church is that there's been plenty of times where there has been kind of, obviously it's a lot more complicated than what I'm about to say. So very generalization, but this is from Father Nicholas's mouth is that, it there's a unity of pretty much everything outside of the way that we view church governance. And so there's been times where there's been like the Council of Florence, both sides agreed like that we have the same faith, but whenever it came back to the kind of the masses didn't know each other, and there was animosity between each other. And so he says that really the only way that there is a possibility of reunion is if there's genuine Christian charity and understanding between the two sides, not just on a pastoral and bishop level or hierarchical level, but also in when it comes to laity. So, there is this tradition in the East of having married priests. Not to say that the Latin tradition of clerical celibacy is a bad thing at all. They're both complementary traditions, but there is this tradition in the East of married priesthood, and so I want to expose my Western audience to that, as well as to just to thank God for the glory um, and beauty of this call that some people have in the Eastern churches. So I think it's multifaceted. Also, Father Nathan, I've listened to a podcast that he did with Father Michael Laughlin and Mother Natalia on their podcast, What God Is Not. And it was really brilliant. So I figured that he would be the man to bring on for this topic. Um, and so, yeah, just anyways, Father Nathan, I've said your name multiple times throughout the podcast so far, but I haven't really introduced you too much. So could you introduce yourself to the audience and tell them kind of a little bit of your background and how you
Sure.
came to be where you are today?
Sure. You are tempting me with all of the talk about reunion, because that's something that I've given a lot of thought to, and what I think how we need think I think we need to reframe a lot of the way that we process this stuff.
Mm,
Um, I mentioned that because it's kind of part of who I am
mm,
in my journey in Christ. Um, I I have spent a lot of time trying to find the truth. And that really is that's since I was 15 years old, that's what I've been doing. And I've certainly I'm not suggesting that I haven't fallen into plenty of sin along the way, but that really has kind of been the goal of my life, is that the passage where Jesus said, searching will find, knocking the door will be open, has always been kind of my passage. The thing that I immediately intuited when I read that passage was that um, God isn't just calling us to know about Him; He's calling us to know Him, and that's a personal kind of knowledge, isn't it? And so I believed right from the beginning, and still maintain, that encounter with God um, is preeminent in our search. This is why the beatific vision is the culmination of that thing, right? Because it's ultimate encounter forever. So my journey has been one which I could we decided to give a condensed version of what I was telling you about before.
Yeah.
So basically, I have traveled the various gamuts of Protestant theology through and through and all over the place. And I decided a while ago that really my own faith is how I would describe myself as an apostolic Catholic Christian of the Italo-Greek or Ruthenian Greek faith, and all that's quite nuanced. Um, and I think Roman Catholics should start, those who really want to be traditionalists should really be referring to themselves as apostolic Catholics of the Orthodox Roman faith.
Yeah.
But more about that maybe some other time. For now, my interest is understanding. My interest has grown from searching for what the true form of Christianity is, to trying to kind of bring together an integrated view of what it really means to be um, who we are as Catholics of the apostolic faith. And my own spiritual tradition is Eastern, but that doesn't keep me from, working in the Western world. I'm actually pursuing a pontifical degree at the University of St. Mary's right now, and it's all Roman Catholics, and I find that to be a blast and lots of
Yeah.
fun. And I'm learning all kinds of things that I didn't know before.
Yeah.
So there's a little bit about myself. Oh yeah, also I'm married. That's what we're talking about, right? I'm married, and I have five daughters, ranging from 14 to 5.
That's awesome. Did you ever think you were gonna be a, what the youth is calling a hashtag girl dad whenever you were growing up?
No,
Did you think you're gonna be a girl dad?
no. It's fundamentally really hard because I like really manly things like boxing and grappling and,
Yeah.
and and fishing and hiking. And no, my daughters aren't very interested in that, and I'm hoping that as they get bullied along the way in life, they'll ask me to start teaching them how to box, and I'll be able to get some of that out. But I always kind of had high hopes for including them in my activities. And they find my activities awfully boring, and I found Barbie's awfully boring. So it is always interesting,
Yeah. That's
but it's
wonderful.
taught me
How
a lot. It's taught me a lot.
Yeah, I'd love to come back to that topic of reunion at the end of the episode if we have time. But to begin with, how did you one meet your wife? Because I remember listening to the podcast and it has something kind of similar to. I mean, she was part of your journey
She
from.
was.
Yeah.
She was. I okay. Another condensed version of the story. Um, I was kind of like I was one of those like high school kids who got in trouble, and so I was going to this high school, which was kind of like it was the high school for dummies. It's where you go when when you're considered naughty. And so, anyways, one of my best friend at the time, and still, my best friend, he was a boxer. He's actually a pro boxer now. We were sitting in class, and this guy walks in, kind of very tough, and my buddy goes, "We should jump that guy." And I said, "No, I had just started following the Lord. No, this isn't what I'm about." And so he would always mad dog us every day. Every time he came into the class, mad dogging. I don't know if they still use that phrase, but it means he would stare at us. And one day after, I thought, okay, what I need to do is I need to talk to this guy about Jesus. So I walked up to him after class and I said, "Hey, if you died today, where would you go?" And he thought I was threatening him. And so I see his two friends kind of coming up at the side of me, and I thought, okay, I better change the conversation really quickly. So I said, what I mean is, do you know Jesus, right? So that immediately we became friends, me and this guy, and we started hanging out. And because he wanted to know about Jesus, and his parents happened to be previously they were missionaries, and they were strong Christians, and well, I started hanging out with his parents. They invited me to their Bible study and all the rest. And Allie was and remains his sister.
Oh,
Okay. And so what happens is Allie went on a mission for 6 months to Fiji and Papua New Guinea and New Zealand. When she returned home from the mission, I went on a mission to Australia and New Zealand, Samoa. And we started talking on the phone and said, hey, we should go to Bible college together. We both need to know the Bible. We've seen some really crazy things on this mission trip, people flailing and barking and all the rest. We probably should get a little more grounded in the word. And so we were just friends at this time, and we decided to go to Bible college together. And so we did. So we went to Calvary Chapel Bible College together, and we were just friends, really, truly platonic. I mean, people don't believe me, but I didn't think of her in any way but platonic. And I claim she did towards me, but she will deny this. Um, and then the second semester is when I really felt like God just went like this. There's your wife, and it was pretty clear in my mind. I hadn't dated anyone since I'd become a Christian, and that was kind of intentional. And what was very intentional that I wouldn't date unless I thought it was really significant. And so her and I planned on being missionaries together. We were going to be missionaries to Africa. That was our thought at the time in life. But needless to say, that didn't happen. And instead, we spent a semester abroad in England, in York, England. And there we fell in love and began our life together.
that's amazing. Oh, wow. That's like one of those things you only hear of in like a movie. Like you're straight out of like a movie where you go up and you're getting mad dog by a guy. You go up to talk to him about Jesus, and then you end up dating and marrying his sister.
Yeah,
That's
he
incredible.
was he was actually my best man too.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
That's
at
so
the wedding.
cool. That's
So
so cool.
yeah,
Wow. That's amazing. How long after y'all got married did you become Catholic?
it was a process. We went. I mean, remember? So I went through after we got married. I went through one, two, three master's degrees at different Protestant universities because I kept changing positions on things, and fundamentally I would change a position on something that whatever that group was thought it was significant enough that I couldn't be
A
a
part of them
pastor.
anymore?
And I always thought I was going to be a pastor. That always was the aim. But it just kept kind of pushing me further out. So we got married when I was only 21. And after that, I was basically on a theological journey, jumping from, you know, from ecclesial body to ecclesial body. And it took us, gosh, I suppose it took us another 10 years or so
Wow.
to before I became Catholic, and then even that was difficult. I mean, I would have gone Orthodox a long time ago. Had it not been for my wife, she didn't want to go Orthodox, and that's what I was really exploring. If I hadn't met Holy Resurrection Monastery, I probably would have ended up Orthodox.
Yeah.
Um, and what I mean by that is uppercase Orthodox, of course. I consider
Yeah.
myself fully Orthodox, but uppercase Orthodox.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, yeah, it really was. What happened was I was reading Elder Joseph the Hesychast, who remains for me preeminent modern saint. And I was doing so in Greece. I was in Athens studying at the Apostoliki Diakonia, which is kind of the headquarters of ecumenism. And I went there as an Anglican, to learn modern Greek. I was the dunce of the class. It was the rest were all of these Roman Catholics who were coming from pontifical universities out in Rome, and also Orthodox. And I was the one Protestant in the group of about, I don't know, 80. And I was there
Wow.
in Greece, and I had um, I had met this monk over at St. Anthony's Monastery in Florence who he promised to get me on Mount Athos, and so I went there. And what happened was, as I was telling Ali, as I was in Greece, I'm really growing in my faith here. I feel like I'm a better dad than I've ever been before, and I'm not with you. And that's because I'm praying, so well for my family. And when I got back, I said, we've got to figure this thing out. And so every morning we would get up and we would study the fathers, and we would study the Roman Church, along with the Eastern Church. And I hadn't come to my full decision, but we went to Holy Resurrection Monastery. And what happened was, I had taken Allie to Orthodox churches prior to that, and she wasn't feeling at home. And she went to Holy Resurrection Monastery, and the monks there, and especially Abbot Nicholas, is very ecumenical in the sense that he immediately embraces and always has evangelicals, and they embraced her, and it's that love that she felt that made her go, I could come back to the Catholic Church. My wife was baptized Catholic,
Mm,
and so she said, I kind of would like to have at least some of my roots in the whole thing. So I said, well, you
mm.
could do this. We could do Catholic, be Orthodox Catholics, Catholic Orthodox people, whatever, however you want to put it. And I said, yeah, that works for me, and I already have my spiritual father, as Abbot Nicholas there. And so, this makes sense. Let's move forward with it. I think I was thinking, well, we can move there, and I'll have more time to kind of figure out which side I'm going to take. Abbot Nicholas told me, you could, come here and decide if you want to be Orthodox or Byzantine Catholic after a while. You don't have to. I'm not going to push it on you. Oh, that's appealing. And then I talked with a friend of mine. Now, Father Nathaniel Kidd, he's an Anglican, and we would have lots of theological debate with one another. And he was kind of mad at me for leaving the Anglican Church, a little bit mad at me, I think. And he said, oh, you're just going to go be Byzantine, and you're not even going to join the Byzantine Church. You're like disembodied. You're like a Gnostic. And it worked. It worked. My pride kicked in. I went, I am going to become Byzantine Catholic, darn it. I
Yeah.
moved out there. I'm being Byzantine Catholic. How dare you call me a Gnostic? And so the kind of the combination of the community, my wife's desire to become Catholic, and my friend making fun of me, pushed me over the edge. And of course, all of my studies, I studied quite a bit. But these are funnier stories than my studying. So anyways, at the end, we decided to come all the way in.
That's awesome. So wait, you did you live at the monastery for a little while? Is that what you said?
Well, what happened was, I was 3 months away from diaconal ordination in the Neshota House. That's the Neshota House is like 20 miles outside of Milwaukee. And so my last semester, Abbot Nicholas said, why don't you just get a house out here and move out here? And so I left the seminary. I did not leave the degree, but I just
Yeah.
moved away. And so I moved up next to the monastery house, right next to the property.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
It's,
I know
like
where you're talking about.
like
Yeah. I don't know
200-foot
which
walk.
one it is, but I've walked
You
down
get
that
an idea.
area, so
Yeah.
yeah.
So I worked on a farm and did that for 6 months,
Awesome.
and just went to services, you know, every day.
Yeah. I love their church because they I don't know. I mean, I know some in the eparchy of Phoenix, I think, that don't have pews, but I love that you can just move so freely about in their chapel. It's such a beautiful place. I
It
love
feels
it.
right.
Yeah. But I oh shoot. When does like the timeline of your firstborn being born line up with all of this?
That was back in 2008. Allie was, we conceived Sydney, and that was when I was at Reformed Theological Seminary in Orlando.
Okay.
Okay, we moved back and had her in California.
Nice. Okay.
And
And
that
then,
was, I had one more year at master's seminary at that point. I had taken a break from my MDiv because the whole question of epistemology was driving me nuts. So I went and did that and then came back and finished my MDiv.
yeah. And so that's a presuppositionalism is what you're talking about there.
Yeah.
Epistemology. Gotcha. Which that's more reformed, right? Typically speaking, reformed
Typically speaking,
epistemology.
yes.
Yeah.
I still would affirm presuppositionalism, but I would say that the presupposition needs to be a bit broader than the Word of God, because
Yeah.
we're Catholics and all. But I still would affirm some of that thinking. I think it's on the right path. But right, it came out of Cornelius Van Til, who was classically trained out of kind of the Westminster divines, if you will.
Yeah.
Those kind
Yeah.
of old school Westminster guys.
Yeah. No, it's really interesting learning about like the different kind of the historical forms of, Christianity, even within, Protestantism or whatever.
Mhm.
'Cause it's much different from from what I experience on a daily basis at a mega church.
Mhm. Oh
But
yeah.
anyways, um so how old was she whenever y'all came into and how many children did y'all have whenever you came into the East?
We came in with three.
3, okay. And
Yes,
so
came
were
with three.
they baptized, chrismated, and received First Holy Communion with y'all,
Sydney,
or
Sydney and Savannah, Anglican. Rosalind, she was born on December 6th, so we named her Rosalind Nicole, and then also my spiritual father then was Abbot Nicholas, and so it kind of went together, didn't it? And
yeah.
so we had the whole we Allie and I had a radical sonation, right? Because she was baptized Catholic, that threw me in a bit of a curb. So
Yeah.
with that out. So, but that was done along with Budsy's baptism, and then the whole family was received through confirmation.
What did you say? Radical what?
Sonation. It
What does that
means,
mean?
well, what it means is that they kind of go, they fix the problem of an illegitimate marriage, if you will, at the core.
Oh,
It's so it's a way of fixing the problem where basically you're not claiming that the people were living in kind of some adulterous state, but
yeah.
you affirm that that it's the marriage is valid at the core.
Okay.
I think you could. I think Augustine kind of already laid some foundations for this when he argued that he seems to have argued that baptism, the thing works. It's valid if you're outside of the church, but it doesn't actually do the thing where it forgives you, right? So you come back to the church, and then the baptism functions properly.
Okay.
Seems to be his argument,
That
and
makes sense.
even in the Orthodox Church, the concept economia isn't. It's that by the blessing of the bishop, the thing is made work. I don't want to say valid. It
Mm,
was, even if it was all of the proper parts, if you will, of the sacraments are in place, but nevertheless, it needed the blessing of the bishop. So there
yeah.
is justification for this apparently strange idea.
Yeah. Isn't there some groups of Orthodox that rebaptize converts?
It's a very very small
Small group.
portion of Greek Orthodox.
Okay.
And I would argue that it's not. Number one, it's wrong. It's very wrong.
Yeah.
Um, well, you're going to take me down a rabbit hole if you ask me this question.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm
You
writing
can
a
just
paper
say
on
it's
this
very
right
wrong.
now.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is not. It is not the official. I would say it is. It has actually already been condemned by the recent council. Um,
Yeah.
that transpired because those other that council affirmed other councils, which, like for example, Mark of Ephesus said, to only receive Catholics through confirmation or through
Yeah.
laying on of hands. Well, so this recent council that they had, the Great and Holy Synod, right? It affirmed the councils that disaffirmed rebaptisms.
Yeah.
So there's a lot to be said about this.
Yeah, I just got done reading Callistus Ware's The Orthodox Church, and he's so I'm reading like a very old edition, so he's like talking before they held that synod in the Orthodox Church. So he was talking about how that was one of the things that he wanted them to address, like if they ever got around to having a synod.
Mhm.
Okay, it's a little bit off topic, but
Yeah,
um
there's a lot there though.
so how many years after you came into um the church at Holy Resurrection did you decide that you were gonna discern priesthood, and what did that process kind of look like? Obviously, because your wife has to consent to it as well, but I'm assuming that was relatively because you had already planned to be a pastor, right? So I think she'd kind
Yeah.
of
Yeah,
already.
from 15, I planned from 15, right when I came to Christ, I realized I want to give everything to this,
Yeah.
right? Like the vocation just, it was immediate for me. And it had I didn't know exactly what it was going to be, but I knew it was going to be everything. And I didn't know exactly what it was going to be, but it was going to be everything. So that we never had to work that out. That was never a thing we had to discuss because both Ali and I were gung ho on that idea right from the beginning. She was going to be a missionary. I was going to be a missionary, and that's all there was to it.
Mm,
Right. And so that missionary spirit always existed in our relationship. I wouldn't have married her if it wasn't. If she didn't have that, it wouldn't have worked out.
yeah.
And she would, and she the same thing. If I hadn't wanted that, she wouldn't have married me.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was
Amazing.
never an issue.
Yeah. And so how long out was it just like immediately you thought you were gonna become a priest in the Byzantine rite?
Immediately,
Immediately.
immediately.
Okay.
Yeah. That was part of my mindset right from the start. And um, yeah, what happened was Bishop John Kudrick, he's emeritus of Parma. He invited me to come work at the cathedral for a year. I was there at Holy Resurrection for 6 months, and then I was invited to work at the cathedral for a year before they sent me to seminary. And it really worked out very well because you won't find guys getting sent to seminary anymore that quickly.
Yeah.
But Bishop John, I think, and I think quite rightfully, discerned that I had enough education that it wasn't going to harm me to send me to
Mhm.
seminary early. And um,
Yeah, 3 master's degrees, you've gotta you gotta
yeah,
a little bit. So, that's incredible. So, what was that like? And what? Because I mean, some people out there are probably like, "Oh my gosh, like, what does seminary look like when you're married?" Like, because most people in the Roman Church, it's like you go away as a celibate and you live alone. So, what did that look
yeah,
like?
yeah. It's an interesting phenomenon, one that our church is still growing to learn, and I have my strong opinions about these things.
Yeah. 'Cause
Um,
wait, I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you, but you just came in. Were you one of the the first people to enter, or not first, but you entered in right after or around the time that Pope Francis like legal or
I was at Holy Resurrection Monastery when that happened.
okay. Could you explain that to the audience, by the way? Actually, I'm just referencing that off the cuff, and
Yeah,
some
sure. I
people
forget.
don't
I
know.
forget the letter. What the name was? Do you recall the name?
I don't
Okay.
recall the name.
I'm
No.
not. I am not a papal document guy, and that's just part of my ecclesiology. Is that's not where my focus is at. Um, so yeah. So what happens is Bishop John says to me, um, ordaining married men right now is a difficult thing to do, and he had told me a story about I'm not going to repeat, um, about how difficult it can be, and kind of how Bishop Nicholas kind of was a hero for doing it just whenever he wanted, and this kind of a thing. And but he said, well, we're going to try, with you. And Bishop John was, I love Bishop John Kruger, he was a really holy man, and he wanted to try it. He said, but I can't guarantee anything. Okay, it's fine. But then they called me and said, well, Pope Francis just kind of gave like full on permittance to do it without asking permission any longer.
Yeah.
We used to have to ask permission. They'd have to go to Rome and
Yeah.
ask permission for individual priests. And Pope Francis, I think quite fittingly, um, gave us a little bit more of our tradition back, right? Because a
Yeah.
lot of our tradition is being stolen from us. We've been robbed of
Yeah.
being allowed to be who we are, and he gave us some of that back by doing that. And so, yeah, that freed of them. So I wasn't the first priest they had sent, a married man they had sent to seminary, but I was the first married man they sent to seminary after that.
After that decree.
Francis had given that decree. Correct. Yeah.
Wow. Wow. That's so cool. I mean, yeah. So I actually had on. I need to be careful because I don't know if I'm going to post this before or post the one that the interview I did with. I mean, you were at Parma, right? Is what you were saying?
Hmm.
No, you actually know her because I was talking to her about it. It's oh gosh, I'm gonna say her name. It's Therese. Therese at the she works for the bishop
Hmm. Yeah.
and
Fetzko.
yeah.
Mhm.
And so she came on and just gave a little bit of an introduction to the Ruthenian tradition, the
Mhm.
Ruthenian church in particular, because obviously Ruthenian is part of the Byzantine Rite, but it's its own
Mhm.
particular church. And so she was talking about how like whenever the East came to the United States, the Ruthenian Catholics came. There was the controversy where a lot of Latin Catholics were very scandalized
Yeah.
by the fact that there were married priests.
Right.
Because I mean, at the heart of Roman Catholic theology, there is the admittance that like it's not part of like celibacy and priesthood aren't intertwined to the point
It's a
where like there can't
discipline.
be.
It's called a
It's a
discipline.
discipline.
Yeah.
It's a discipline, but the way that some people talk about it makes it seem like it is like intertwined with it, if that makes sense. Like the way that I heard it on a popular level described whenever I was at Roman Catholic churches, etc. Like it sounds as if it's not just a discipline, but that it's like it's fundamental. Um, so anyways, a lot of the laity were scandalized, and so the bishops didn't allow them to be married, and that unfortunately caused some schisms. But anyways, so getting back to your situation where you're entering in, what did that look like as far as because you went to the seminary in Pittsburgh, I'm assuming.
Hmm.
Yeah, and so did you and your wife like move to Pittsburgh and live off campus nearby? How did
That's
that work
exactly what
out?
we did. Yeah.
Okay,
That's exactly what we did. Yeah,
cool.
it wasn't a problem. I try to tell people this all the time. There look at any other Orthodox seminary in the U.S. They've been doing this a lot longer than us, right?
Yeah,
They're
yeah.
fine. Go to any Protestant seminary
I
in
was
the
about to say
U.S.
Anglican and Protestant.
They're
Yeah,
fine. People think, well, no, they can't handle it. It's too much for a married. No, it's not. It's not too much for a married guy. I mean, I had a 4.0, and I'm not trying to brag. I just want to point
yeah.
out, no, it wasn't.
It
This
wasn't
is a
it wasn't
myth.
insane.
This is a
Yeah,
silly myth to think that just because you're a married guy, you can't do this. I mean, as the president of the United States, they have always been married, and they're running an entire country for goodness sakes.
that is true.
You know,
That is absolutely
and
true.
what do you
Yeah,
want? Most
yeah.
CEOs, they're married. What about most men who work full-time careers now? They're working more than 40 hours. They're working 70, 80 hours a week. And what is that
Mhm.
like? That's seminary. That's what seminary is like. So is
Yeah,
it hard? Of course it's hard. Life is hard. Working a full-time career is hard, but is it doable? Absolutely. And every other experience in the U.S. has borne testimony to that, both by the Protestants and the Orthodox. Of
yeah,
course, you could make the argument that Protestant seminary is distinct, and it is distinct from Catholic seminary, and that the human formation is a much more important component. As I would argue, generally speaking, so is a liturgical formation,
yeah,
or sacramental formation, if you will, and so yeah, it's more intense, but the previous arguments I've just stated apply over quite clearly.
yeah. And Anglican, I mean Anglican, as well as I mean, especially Orthodox is way closer. So, I mean, Anglican even kind of, I don't know what your experience was in Anglican seminary, because I know there's low church,
Yes.
meaning like very more, like way more looking like an evangelical church, where like high church looks way more like a Catholic church. So I don't know, are there like different seminaries for like
Yes.
Anglicans that are high church and Anglicans that are low
Yes.
church? Okay,
Yes.
that makes
Yes.
sense.
If you are an Anglican listening to this podcast, and or a Protestant of any stripe, and you want to experience the Anglo-Catholic world, go to Nashotah House.
Okay.
It's a great institution for for people. Like, it's truly a via media, but you might decide to cross that bridge and become Catholic or Orthodox, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Because the school provides that opportunity, the opportunity is to engage with evangelicals and Catholics and people who are Orthodox minded and all the rest, and it's a very fun institution, but it is the highest of high church Anglo-Catholic institutions.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming that's what you were by then. I'm
Yeah.
assuming you had
Yeah.
advanced.
Well, when I first went into Shota House right at the beginning, I was still a Calvinist for like this much time, because I was a pretty strong Calvinist before. I used to teach. I actually taught a course on the 5 points of Calvinism over at Eternity Bible College with Cornerstone.
Yeah.
Um, and so when I first came to Nashotah House, I was really Calvinist. I think, and I kind of even scandalized. We had my first professor there was Father Chad over at St. Vlad's, um,
Oh.
and my buddy told me that my buddy Nathaniel, again, I'm throwing him to the bus for the second time in one episode. I haven't talked to him in a while, but hopefully he'll be okay with this. He said, "Oh yeah, Father Chad said, what are they letting that guy in for?" To Nathaniel, right? Well,
Yeah.
because I was really Calvinist at that time.
Yeah.
So when I first went in the chapel, I didn't know what to do with the Mary altar. They have a Mary altar there, and they all cross themselves when they walk by it. And
Oh,
it took
wow.
me a while, to be okay with it. I kind of had to figure out what in the world they were doing,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
No, that's interesting. So, when when how long was your seminary formation?
At
At,
um,
BCS. I
oh,
mean, my
BCS.
bad, you've had multiple seminary formations at
Yeah, it
BCS
helps.
at BCS.
So I ended up doing 4 years. My last year was basically just hanging out and doing liturgical stuff, which was fun.
Mhm. Okay, cool. That's not the normal thing, right? It was just you'd kind of already been through so many
Yeah,
experiences?
they
Yeah.
did make me take a lot because so I did an MAT, a Master of Arts in Theology in Dogmatics, instead of the MDiv, since I already had an MDiv.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense.
Mhm.
And so where did you get placed as soon as you were ordained?
I was working with Bishop Milan Locke out in Cleveland
Okay,
for
cool.
for the first year and a half as a
Yeah,
priest, and we
and
had four
then
parishes at that time. It was a lot.
okay, and so then you got how did you get into the Diocese of Phoenix?
I'm from LA.
Or Eparchy, my bad. You're
Yeah,
from
I'm
LA.
I'm from
Okay.
LA. So, well, I'm from Simi Valley, but if you don't know California, I tell people I'm from LA.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's where I grew up, and that's where my family's still at, and most of my friends, and so I kind of realized I fit in more on the West Coast. It really West
Mhm.
Coast is very different than
Oh, yeah.
Midwest,
Oh, yeah.
right?
Especially Wisconsin, like, that area, Wisconsin,
Yeah,
the Ohio area, definitely very different. Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
that makes sense. And so you've been where are you currently at right
I'm
now?
in Vegas.
Vegas,
I'm at Our
okay.
Lady of Wisdom in Las Vegas. Yeah, it's an
Okay,
Italo.
cool.
We're Italo Greeks here. So, and I
Italo
love
Greeks.
it because the Greek tradition really is what brought me to um, the Catholic faith. And so for me, it's kind of a return home.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, how's parish life in Vegas?
I love it. I didn't. I kind of. I got to be honest. I thought it was going to be strange. I thought people were going to be really strange. Um, I really did.
When
Well,
you
I
see
guess
the movies make it really biased.
yeah. Well, and I'm even worse because I took it a step further and I thought, okay, the people who move here to work around the strip. The
Yeah.
people who work around the strip aren't highly educated, and then those people are producing with other people like that. And what this is what I'm thinking, right?
Yeah.
And then I come to the church and know very intelligent people and very conservative people, really, because we have a lot of Roman Catholics.
Yeah.
Um, the Byzantine churches are mostly made up of Roman Catholics. and on the West Coast, not in the Midwest or the East Coast.
Yeah.
Um, but I was surprised actually, and it continued to be pleasantly surprised. I love the parish here. It's wonderful,
Yeah.
wonderful experience.
It's amazing. I've actually I don't know if you could confirm this, but I feel like in the United States, you do have this massive amount of people who were Roman Catholic becoming Byzantine Catholic, or like if they become Byzantine Catholic from like Protestantism or whatever. It's typically in the Ruthenian right. I feel like
Yeah,
I mean, there's definitely Ukrainian and Melkites, but is there a specific reason do you think that is? I mean,
it's bigger.
huh?
It's bigger.
Yeah,
I think that's
that's
it.
true.
I think it's bigger. Ukrainians are known to be more ethnic, generally speaking.
That's definitely true in the churches that I've been here, and
Hmm.
it's very beautiful. The Ukrainian liturgy at St. George's in Manhattan is
Yeah,
like whenever they have their choir, it's the most beautiful
yeah,
thing I've ever seen. But it is like everything in the parish is in Ukrainian, and the English service is not very many people.
yeah. Well,
So
the reason why we're called Byzantine Catholic is the Ruthenians chose that because they wanted to be Americanized. They wanted to be
hmm
American. So it's not too different than the idea of the OCA, the
yeah,
Orthodox Church of America, right? I imagine our audience is mostly Roman Catholic, right?
yes,
Is that correct? Yeah.
yes,
So I
yeah,
should explain Orthodox
yeah,
stuff.
yeah,
Yeah. So it's very similar to the Orthodox Church of America, and those are pretty much the same people, by the way. That church was pretty much made by Ruthenians who left because of them being forced to
Bishop,
give up the
Bishop,
Mary
yep,
priesthood.
yep,
So so yeah, that caused major issues. But so the same people had the same idea, which was we need to be an American church.
yeah. Yeah. No, that's yeah, that's what I figured. I mean, generally speaking, it's just yeah, it seems like um very American as opposed to but it does retain its traditions like Father Ed dancing at the parish that I go to during the St. Nicholas feast and they have like all the like Rusin like dances as well as food and all that. I That's one of my favorite parts about the traditions. But um so we've talked a lot about the practical side of like just your story, but could you talk about just priesthood itself and maybe explain like historically how things developed to where some people can live and be Catholic their whole life and not even think that married priests could be like a reality, like how historically could develop where married priests are completely valid, but that some people wouldn't think that they're valid. Does that make sense?
It's hard because there is no development, right?
Yeah.
There's no development.
Yeah.
For the East, there is no development. The only
Yeah. Yeah.
development is for bishops.
Yeah.
That's it. The bishops can't be married. That's the only development.
Yeah.
So it's the West that developed. Um, and I don't begrudge the West for developing. Um, um, it's theology, and I think that a celibate priesthood, can be a spirituality, an important spirituality. And so it's not. This isn't me by saying we didn't develop. Isn't at all trying to say, well, development is bad. I don't think that. I don't think that at all. It's just to affirm, like, well, there's not much for me to say because
Yeah.
it's been that way from the beginning, right? The Apostle Peter or Paul, right? Do I not have the right to take with myself a married woman, a married believing woman, like the rest of the apostles?
Yeah.
Well, the apostles were married. I mean, there's if there's some type of invalidity, if the question is invalidity, well, then the apostles were invalid. In which case the apostolic faith is invalid. In which case
Yeah.
Catholicism is invalid. So
Yeah.
now we have a real problem if we go down that line of thinking.
Yeah.
I think actually the intelligent conversation really isn't about that because that's an unintelligent idea that it wouldn't be valid. I think the intelligent conversation is practicality.
Yeah.
Really, it's really just um, utilitarian. We should talk about the utility of married priesthood versus
Yeah.
celibate priesthood. But any other conversation is again, it's insane.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that there is like um I think what I was trying to hint at is that like in the West, there's this development of like celibacy being required for all priests, and so you kind of get this divorcing of the two cultures where there's not communication. So like you have all these Roman Catholics that grow up and they just like don't like have
I
any
know.
kind of memory at all of married priests, and so they come in contact with us, and you know the East is saying no, like we're your past, like you were like, I mean, very early on, obviously. I'm not saying that it was like thousands of years into it, but very early on
Yeah.
you do see a push in the West for
Hmm.
celibacy.
Yeah.
um
Yeah. It's true. It's true. The Western patristic tradition is definitely in favor of celibacy from the very early stages. It's true.
yeah,
And the
yeah,
East, it's the opposite, of course. There's a great book called Vested in Grace. I would suggest anybody get and read if you want to know the Eastern tradition. It takes you through the patristic tradition, takes you through canon law, all the way through, um, and it just gives you a much broader understanding of what took place in the East versus what took place in the West. With the West, you have to go study the Western tradition because it is a different patristic tradition, and different
yeah,
traditions developed along the way there.
yeah.
There's no question about it. I guess I'm more interested in what and this phenomenon of being weirded out by married priests. What
Yeah,
what what is going on there at a psychological level? Because again, it's not a theological thing. There's nothing in Scripture which would suggest that that priests shouldn't be married.
yeah.
There's nothing in the
Maybe a
East.
maybe a wrong reading of Paul and not reading any of the other contexts of Paul. Like you
What
read
is
that
it?
one passage in Paul, the whole
Chapter
idea of
7
like,
of Corinthians?
yeah, but I'm clearly saying that that's not a good reading, because like
Right.
later he says that like the bishop should be like the wife or the husband of one wife,
A
or
one
talking
wife
about
husband,
priests.
one wife husband,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. So it would be obviously a completely out of context reading, is what I'm saying. But I think
Yeah.
that would be the one that would lead to it. But like you're saying,
Yeah.
the totality of scripture. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's interesting. I mean, but even there in Corinthians 7, Paul's not saying you can't be.
yeah,
He's saying it's easier. Again, it's
yeah,
a utility. It's all about utility. Paul's not talking about ontology. He's talking about utility very
yeah,
clearly, right? And he's saying it because of the times. He's saying it even in that context. He's saying because of the times. Think about the law that the life that Saint Paul lived. Imagine having a wife in that context. It'd be so difficult, right?
yeah,
To drag along with you. Look how many times Paul got beaten. He was shipwrecked, right? You know the whole list in Corinthians, right? Second
yeah,
Corinthians. He was undergoing starvation. He was stoned a couple times and died. I mean, imagine bringing a wife along with you. Well, that would be irresponsible. You'd have to leave her behind. You wouldn't be a very good husband if you did that. How are you going to take care of a woman living a life like Saint Paul? Well, now apply that over to contemporary secular priests. I think that's laughable to compare yourself to Paul. Um,
yeah,
is this if you actually look at Paul's argument based on utility there, um, well, I don't think married priests are living celibate priests are living anywhere near like that. Maybe in Africa, certainly not
yeah.
in the U.S.
And I
Um,
think the idea of celibate priesthood is, I remember do you know Father Deacon Dragani? Anthony Dragani at all? Do you know him? He's
um,
he's a Ukrainian. He's a Ukrainian.
I don't say no.
He's amazing. He goes on a lot of shows and exposes people to like the traditions of the East in a very, very good, very like well thought out manner. Um, I think he actually was. I mean, I don't know what the correct term is, but fathered by Father David Abernathy for a while. So
Okay,
really
go
good
ahead.
spiritual tree. Um,
Mhm, yeah,
but
absolutely.
anyways, he uh oh gosh, why did I just completely blank. What were we talking about?
We were talking about. I was talking about utility,
Yes,
and
utility.
and that to compare oneself to Saint Paul, based on
Oh,
First Corinthians
yes,
7,
yes.
is a bit
Okay.
of a stretch of the imagination.
He came on to a friend of mine, Michael Lofton's YouTube channel, and, he talked about, like, priestly celibacy, and he was saying that, in the East, the way that we view something like celibacy is it's a whole part of the monastic package, and so, like, to live as a celibate but then to, like, live like a bachelor would be, like, completely contradictory if you know what I'm saying, to, like, the whole idea of what, like, not denying your sexuality, but obviously repurposing it, if you're celibate, and so, like, it's all part of a single monasticism, and so that's why in the East, we view it as, like, you're either discerning traditionally, it's you're discerning monasticism or marriage, um but he was talking about that, and I thought it was pretty brilliant because I know that the best priests in the West are those that truly live kinda monastic. Like, if you look at them, they live, obviously, like, they try to do as best of a communal life as they can as a parish priest, but they really, like, deny themselves. Like, they're
I,
not
I
living
think that's true in the
lavishly.
East as well.
Yeah.
I think that's true as well in the East.
Yeah. Well, I guess that would be true in general because if you're doing that, then you're being conformed to Christ's life, you know?
Yeah, yeah, I think so.
Yeah. But I mean, what I mean to specifically say is like they're not like, driving like a 2023, like really nice like truck unless it was literally a gift to them. Um, but yeah, I think it is interesting because I mean a lot of people practicality wise. Um, I think a lot of people think whenever they look at someone like yourself, they think of you as a married priest running a parish the size of like 1,200 families, as and like they think, oh, but a celibate, that would be like a benefit of celibacy is being more available to that. But I mean, how big is your parish, like family
Well,
wise?
first of all, I want to agree with that statement. I think that's true. I think that a celibate man can be, and that is part of that's an inference of what St. Paul is saying when he says, right, to be that there's an advantage of being celibate, even as he was, because the celibate man can give himself to things of God, where a married man has to be concerned about his wife. So from that teaching within the context, Paul's, I think, talking about the difficulty of a missionary and doing that
Yeah,
life in particular. But I also think it's applicable to the day to day reality of running a parish, and that yeah, I think that celibates can give their attention, healthy celibates, and I've seen both cases,
yeah,
um, because a lot of this conversation revolves around ideals. There's kind of this ideology, which
yeah,
is dangerous, I think, because as I already kind of stated, I think that the there's nothing ontological about this. I think it's really utility, and I think that should be the way that we frame these kinds of questions: is what is beneficial for the growth and development of the body of Christ and for our own interior lives. Um, that's really the question, and I think that's um, it's true that a celibate man can pick up and run to a congregant who needs their help before a married guy, right? If I have, I mean, this is just obvious, right? If I have to go pick up my daughters from school and a parishioner calls me and says, Father, I really need to talk to you right now. Can you come over? I'll say, hold on, let me take a look at my calendar. Let me take a look. What? You know what? I'll come over after I pick up so and so.
yeah,
That's true. I have to do that. And so, yeah, for a married man, you have to be very intentional about the way that you allocate your time.
yeah.
Um, and so, yeah, a celibate can do that in a marvelous way. Um, but I do think a lot depends on who we are as individuals as well. Because I know celibates who don't give time to people, and married men who give overabundant
More time. Yeah.
time to people. Just because we have different opportunities doesn't mean that we're going to um, accomplish what we could with those opportunities. Some men are more competent, right? Some men are more competent, and
Yeah.
that competency um, will be more important in the end than the opportunity, the
Yeah.
competency.
Yeah.
So I think, we say it all the time. The married man's temptation is to be a celibate, and the celibate's temptation is to be a married man.
This is being married man. Yep.
We can use our time well, especially if we marry for priests, especially if we marry good holy women. That's what we have to
Yeah.
be doing. And so my wife, she has no problem with if I say I need to go do this. I'll be leaving for probably 6 weeks in summer to go learn Spanish in Mexico for the program I'm doing. And my wife goes, "It's for the church. We're doing it."
Mm-hmm.
So there's also, you've got to marry correctly, and
Yeah.
and someone who supports the mission, someone who's behind it. And if I tell my wife I have to go meet somebody, she's always in support of it. She's not jealous of that. She's with me on it.
Yeah,
But
she has kind of a missionary mentality, which
Mhm,
makes sense because you both kind of intuited that you wanted to be missionaries, so,
mhm.
yeah. That's so beautiful. Actually, Father Ed saying something similar. Father Ed was talking to me, he's like, "I know celibates that are the most, like, selfish people on the planet." Just bec and so he's not, like and he's a celibate, so he's not
Yeah,
calling out, like,
that's it.
celibates just in general, and he loves being celibate, and views it as, like, even though, some of his friends went and became Orthodox in order to get married, like, he decided to remain Catholic and be celibate, and he said he didn't have his hands tied or anything like that, but he, like, really leaned into that. But he even said, like, "I don't think that, you know, there's more of a temptation sometimes to be selfish as a celibate."
Well,
At least
I would go so far as saying the temptation to be selfish is 20 times that for a
yeah,
celibate.
yeah.
It's
C
20 times that at least, because marriage, and Jack, do you have any kids yet? Or
Oh, no. No,
okay,
not yet. No.
marriage and kids, the fathers of the
Yeah.
church refer to it as a kind of martyrdom.
Yeah.
Marriage and kids, if you're any kind of decent father, marriage and kids will make you less selfish.
Mhm.
It will force your hand. It will
Yeah.
eventually, it will break you down, because you get home in the evening and you want to do something selfish. You want to watch TV, you want to drink beer, you want to go hang out with your buddies, you want to watch sports, you want to
Yeah.
name your selfish thing. And no, you're not. You
Yeah.
have kids you have to take care
You
of.
have to give a bath to your kid. Yeah.
Yeah, you don't get to just do whatever you want. I don't, so no, I mean, my wife and I have joked about this, to be honest with you, that we've seen with celibates, we've seen an incredible propensity towards selfishness. And
Yeah.
that's because they didn't, and it's not their fault, actually. It's because they're used to everyone taking care of them oftentimes,
Yeah.
and they don't have to go home and focus their
Yeah.
attention on taking care of little irrational creatures.
Yeah.
Um, you know, they are with people all the time that they want to be around, to have good conversation, and don't force them to do manual labor, and don't
Yeah.
force them to do things they don't want to do, like homework that they hated when they were in school doing, like math. I don't want to ever have
Yeah.
to do math again. Well, guess what? I still have to do it. I hate math.
Yeah.
Mostly because math seems to hate me. But they're not forced into going through the martyrdom. And so it's not. I'm not saying that as a married man, I somehow, because of my virtue. No, the virtue is forced on me.
Yeah. Jordan Peterson talks about that a lot. It's just like on a psychological level. He says like you never mature and become who you are supposed to be until your life isn't about you. And he talks about how for the majority of the population, the gateway into that is marriage.
Yeah, yeah, that's right.
Obviously, they're obviously like, the holy monks, the ascetics of our faith, the saints, like that's not a denial that, oh, because St. John of the Cross in the West, or Saint John Climacus in the East never married, they therefore like never grew up. No, like you can. It's just there
No.
is. I mean, I'm sure Saint John Climacus would say like it is just as much of or I have more temptations to be selfish, as somebody who took on that.
Yeah, the temptation's there, but also
Yeah,
the propensity, the possibility for celibate priests to overcome that temptation and acquire incredible holiness is also there.
yeah,
And there's the utilitarian part, like that yeah, celibates, if they do their job well, it means they're going to fall in love with their parishioners as their children.
yeah,
That's a really wonderful and beautiful thing. Of course, I'm called to do the same thing, but my mind's going to be more distracted because I have biological children.
yeah.
So there's a practical benefit
Which are
if
your parishioners too.
if you do
So,
it. What's that?
which are your parishioners too.
Yeah, which are my
Yeah,
parishioners as well. Yeah.
yeah. Um, what have you baptized any of your children or been able to yet?
No, no, I
No.
haven't. Mm-mm.
Okay, what is it like communing your children?
Oh,
Like, how's that experience spiritually? I don't know. I feel like it's probably pretty normal most of the time, but was there ever like a moment where you almost like cried like doing it?
mm. I've had moments of giving communion to people where I teared up. Um, Gosh, I don't want to throw everybody under the bus today, but it seems like what I'm doing. I, I actually maybe think more about, are these kids really ready to have communion?
Really?
Yeah, I think more about that. I think a lot of our kids, the majority of kids, my kids included, aren't aren't really having the right mindset when they're taking communion.
Mm,
I think, do they even? I just saw you get in a fight with your sister. I didn't see you go to confession and you're taking communion.
yeah.
I think this kind of thing, which is, I think that about adults as well all the time. Um,
Yeah, 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 yeah. I mean, probably myself as well. Like, yeah.
yeah, yeah. I recall one time when I first came to the faith, and I noticed I went to the cathedral, and I said to Bishop John, "Everyone went to communion." Because yeah, I go, "Do you think everyone's ready to go to communion?" He said, "No,
No.
no,
Yeah.
no, of course not." I mean, so it's not just kids, but to be honest with you, um, what I'm looking forward to is a worthy communion. When I see them take a worthy communion, when I see that, maybe I will have a spiritual experience, but it hasn't happened yet.
Yeah. Wow. Um, could you talk a little bit? Because I think this is actually applicable for Western Christians in general as well. Not just with Western and Eastern Christians together in communion and growing in love for each other. But I think that there's an unhealthy view of vocation in the West. I've actually had some other people on to talk about this before, but I think you hinted at it a little bit whenever you were talking in your podcast that you did with Father Michael Laughlin about the whole idea of like, higher states or like more perfect states when distinguishing between like celibacy and marriage. And like just basically it's kind of like a speculative like thing where you're just saying like, oh, well, the more perfect like like state of life is this. And so it kind of, I don't know, you had a comment about that. Do you remember it?
Well, yeah, I think that ultimately life is the Christian life is really. I mean, it's found right in the first two chapters of the ladder of divine ascent, and that's letting go. And um, Saint John the Cross, nada, 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 right? That's the straight and narrow way. And so the aim of the Christian life is to let go, and really to let God do what He always has been wanting to do. That's really a hard thing to let go. And so, yeah, I think the angelic life is kind of our ultimate goal at some point. I think it's incredibly unwise to right out the gate and try to live that life. It's incredibly unwise. It's like asking a baby to run a marathon.
Yeah.
That's stupid. Why would we do that, right? Why would we ask a baby? That's an impossibility, right? When you
Yeah.
look at what the monks accomplish, look at that Father Lazarus, right now, right, who's living out in St. Catherine's, right, living in a cave. I mean, look at John Chrysostom or whatever. He lived like 20 years. He lived out in a cave or something of that sort. Right? That's psychologically impossible. Outside of to have a sound mind and to live in a cave for 20 years
Yeah.
is impossible unless unless you're being visited by God, right? Because you need persons to be sane. That we're communal beings. You need persons to be sane.
That's such a good point.
So we don't
Yeah.
throw someone into that because that's torture, and torture is a sin. We shouldn't be torturing people, so we don't
Yeah.
force them into these things, right? And
Yeah.
so, no, no, it's within the community that there's a discernment on where when we're ready to do certain things.
Yeah.
Um, and so, just because the angelic life should be something we're all aiming for. I mean, if I retired and become, I would love to. In my retirement, if I ever, I don't. I think I'll die a secular priest. I feel like I'm too big to live a long life. Um, I, 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 I would want to be a monk. That's how I would want to live my final days. And that's so I can try to give everything to God. Um, and it would be unwise though for me to jump into that now. That's
Yeah.
not what God has for me yet, and I'm not ready for it. I know I'm not ready for it. I can barely pay attention to God for 5 minutes when I'm by myself, right? I mean, just
Yeah.
sit, say the Jesus prayer, and try not to be distracted for
Yeah.
a minute. I'm not
The
even close.
first minute's going real well, and
Yeah.
then then either anywhere from the 2 minute mark, the 1 minute mark to the 5 minute mark, things are still maybe going well, but then they quickly
Well,
like
you're doing
you.
good if that's the case, because most people can't even do it for a minute without
I
feeling
mean,
distracted.
it's more so for me most of the time it's a minute. The time that it's like ever like a 2 minute, I'm like, wow, like God, you're really like giving me grace to.
Yeah,
Because then
yeah.
the next thing I know, I'm thinking about the sports television show that I saw the other day or whatever. Like, and I'm like, why is that in the recesses of my memory? Which is a good thing because it's showing that my heart has some attachments that it's distracted. But um, yeah. So
So
I
let me
just
just
really
let's say this final word on that. So, if it's okay,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
so my point is also, I think it's incredibly arrogant to just say, well, here's the angelic life, and I want the best life, so I'm doing that one, and the other one, I think it's arrogant because it assumes that that's something that we have within our power to choose and to accomplish. And I think we have to be more open to the grace of God, saying, "Well, here's the thing that I want you to be doing right now." And if we have a humble heart, God can work within our vocation to accomplish exactly what He wants, as opposed to us, these I, you know, being ideological is not a virtue in most cases,
yeah,
and we think it is, but it's really not, and it's actually can be very dangerous
yeah,
to just become an ideologue. Um, and Christianity is much bigger than an idea. Christianity is a person,
yeah, yeah,
and that's where we have to encounter God as a person, and not mainly as an idea. Anyways,
yeah. No,
please.
I mean that's definitely true. I think that in a particular way, the reason I found that helpful and it spurred me on to prayer a little bit more whenever you said it in the podcast you're talking about, and you said very similar comments and your statements just there, but it's just like, you know, whatever you or I are genuinely called to by God, that's the highest state that we could be in.
No,
So I think that while it's like speculative and like, interesting per se, I don't think it's very useful to like be like, okay, like this is the more perfect state of life. So they're like to the point where like it's like, oh, like therefore, like, I don't know, a lot of times it's said and then it's just left out there, and so then people kinda get anxious about it because it's like, "Oh, am I denying, like, the better, like, part whenever I have a desire for this form of life?" As opposed to just like, like, whatever God's calling you and I to, like, that is sanctity. That is the
Absolutely.
path of that's the way to paradise, as,
Mhm.
Saint Paisius of, the Athonite said. I was listening to um a podcast recording of one of his like responses to one of his spiritual children the other day. It's like marriage versus monasticism, and he was just like, whichever one like is for you, like that's your path to paradise. Like
Yeah,
either way, you can achieve paradise. So I love that.
I do too.
Anyways, Father Nathan, do you have any parting words to people? I mean, obviously, as an Eastern Catholic priest, as any thoughts on how to enter into Great Lent these upcoming weeks?
Oh yeah. Well, yeah, I'd say take it seriously. You know, as much as you're able to, take it seriously, and um, figure out where you're at. If it's not, don't go too high. Don't if you've never. It's much like this conversation, isn't it? Don't 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 shoot for the ideal if you're not ready for the ideal. Um, you know, if you've never fasted before, then try not eating meat. But maybe still have fish. If you've done last year, if you worked with the fish and you had fish, maybe this year try no fish or something. So, but always do it in the context of your conversation with your priests and reading of the Holy Fathers. And I don't know. I guess that's not much.
No, that's perfect. That's perfect.
But it
Sometimes the
does
simpler
correspond.
advice is great. Like, take it seriously. Sometimes just like fewer words are. Yeah, I think Saint Benedict probably said something about that in his rule. It's like fewer words, like is like whenever you say fewer words, you say more, or something along those lines. But anyways, thank you so much for coming on. I don't know, do you have any work that you do, like as far as like scholarly things or just like writings or anything that I could point people towards? Because normally that's what I do at the end of these.
Oh,
Um,
no, not really. I every time I write something, I don't do anything with it.
okay,
It just kind of sits on my computer and doesn't do a bit. So no, I did a couple of series on God with us online. I did something on what the deification. I did something on the incarnation by Athanasius.
okay,
Um, I did something else on there as well.
okay. It's on
Um,
God with Us, the
God with us
publications.
online,
Okay,
and then yeah. Other than that, nothing really available
okay.
in book form or article form.
Okay, well, and another way then is what the kind of an alternative that I've just came up with. What can the viewers out there listening pray for you and for maybe your parishioners?
Okay. Well, certainly the time is good. Lent, a holy Lent, holy uh, experience, encounter, um, serious mind, fortitude. Those kinds of things.
Mhm.
An awareness of the liturgical tradition and how it all comes together to be our experience of heaven on earth. All those things. So a good Lent, really.
Yeah. All right. Praise God. Well, thank you so much, Father Nathan, for coming on. And thank you all for listening. As I said, I will try and find the links to his articles online, and put it in the show notes for those of you who may be interested in it. But if not, then just pray for Father Nathan and his parishioners. And I look forward to seeing you all back on next time to hear how Jesus Christ and his church are the answer to the question, what is truth?